organ swelled like a dying heartbeat, its notes crashing through the stained glass haze of St. Mary's Episcopal in Willow Creek, Ohio. Ethan Hale's boots hit the aisle runner with a thud that silenced the murmurs, his chest heaving as if he'd run from the ghosts of every unspoken night. "Dad," he gasped, voice cracking like thunder in the holy quiet. "Don't say I do, because the man you really love is standing right behind me." The church froze, a collective inhale sucking the air from the room. Mark Hale, mid-40s, handsome in that weathered, all-American way with lines etched from too many solitary sunsets, turned from the altar where his bride-to-be, Linda, clutched her bouquet like a shield. Her eyes widened, lace veil trembling, while the priest's Bible slipped an inch in his grip. Guests, neighbors who'd shared barbecues and Little League cheers, shifted in their seats, whispers dying like embers. Ethan's heart hammered, not from fear, but from the fire of finally unleashing the secret that had scorched his soul for years. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a funeral for the truth, and he was the pallbearer. Mark's face drained of color, his tuxedo suddenly too tight, bow tie and noose. "Ethan. Son, what the hell are you?" But the words choked off as Ethan stepped aside, revealing the figure in the vestibule shadows, David Ellis. Tall and lean at 50, silver threading his chestnut hair, eyes like storm-tossed seas locked on Mark with a hunger that spanned decades. David, the college roommate, the late-night confessor, the lover who'd vanished into the military's unforgiving grip before Ethan was even a spark in his parents' complicated dance. It had started innocently enough, or so Ethan told himself in the sleepless hours before dawn. Willow Creek was the kind of town where front porches sagged under the weight of secrets, and maple trees whispered judgments to the wind. Ethan had grown up in the shadow of his father's quiet strength, Mark Hale, the high school history teacher who could make the Civil War feel like yesterday's heartbreak, who coached soccer with a whistle around his neck and a smile that hid oceans. After Mom died, cancer, quick and cruel when Ethan was 16, the house on Elm Street echoed with absence. Mark threw himself into lesson plans and PTA meetings. But Ethan saw the cracks, the way his dad's gaze lingered on old photo albums, the half-written letters tucked in desk drawers, yellowed with time. Ethan himself had known he was different since puberty hit like a freight train. The locker room crushes on broad shoulders and easy laughs, the way his pulse raced not for the cheerleaders but for the quarterback's quiet intensity. He'd buried it deep, like Dad buried his own shadows, dating girls from church youth group just to fit the mold. College in Columbus had cracked that facade, nights in dimly lit bars where hands brushed and truths spilled over cheap whiskey. But coming home for summers meant slipping the mask back on, especially when Dad started seeing Linda. She was kind, a librarian with laugh lines and a knack for apple pie, the sort of woman Willow Creek prescribed for widowers. "She's good for me." Mark had said one evening over burgers on the back deck, his voice steady but eyes distant. Time to move forward. Ethan wanted to believe it. God, he did. Until the box, tucked under the attic floorboards during a spring clean, amid Mom's forgotten scarves and Dad's warbled mixtapes, was a shoebox of Polaroids and letters. Faded images of two young men arm in arm on a fraternity lawn, beers raised in defiant toasts. Mark, clean-shaven and wild-eyed, grinning at a guy who looked like he'd stepped from a Hemingway novel, David. Inscribed on the back in looping script, to M. Forever chasing sunsets with you. D. The letters were poetry and pain. Confessions of stolen kisses in dorm shadows. Promises whispered under Ohio stars. Terror at the draft lottery, ripping them apart in 72. I can't pretend anymore, one ended. Ink smudged like tears. But I'll carry you in every breath. Ethan's world tilted. This wasn't just Dad's past. It was a mirror to his own buried ache. He scoured the internet late into nights, tracing David's name through veteran rolls and dusty alumni pages. A retired architect in Pittsburgh, widowed himself, no kids, no regrets listed, just a quiet life rebuilding bridges, literal and otherwise. The email Ethan sent was a gamble. My name is Ethan Hale. My father is Mark Hale. I found your letters. David's reply came swift. Raw. I've never stopped loving him. If he's happy, tell him I wish him the same. But Mark wasn't happy. Ethan saw it in the forced smiles at Linda's engagement party, the way his hand lingered too long on Ethan's shoulder, as if anchoring himself to the son who'd become his unwitting confessor. Ethan had come out to Mark one rainy afternoon last fall, words tumbling like floodwater. Dad, I'm gay. And I think you get it. Mark had pulled him into a hug that smelled of aftershave and old books, whispering, I always knew, kid. And I love you fiercer for it. No judgment, just the quiet solidarity of shared shadows. That night, over whiskey, Mark admitted fragments. David, the war, the choice to marry Ethan's mom because society demanded it, because love alone wasn't enough to build a life. I love her too. Mark had said, voice gravel. In my way. But David, he was the fire. Ethan pressed then, gently, is the wedding to Linda because you can't have him? Mark's silence was answer enough. Now, in the church's suspended breath, Ethan felt the weight of that fire. Linda's bouquet slipped petals to the floor, her voice a whisper shard. Mark? What's he talking about? Guests murmured, old Mrs. Hargrove clutching her pearls, the mayor's wife fanning herself with the program. David stepped forward, his wool overcoat rumpled from the drive, face a map of roads not taken. Mark, he said, voice steady as rebar. I came because your son has more courage than both of us combined. He emailed me last week. Showed me the letters. I couldn't stay away. Mark's knees buckled slightly, the priest steadying him with a hand that felt profane in the moment. David. God. David. The name hung like incense, thick and sacred. Ethan's throat burned. This was his doing, his detonation. He'd driven through the night with David from Pittsburgh, the older man's stories unfolding like roadmaps, boot camp goodbyes, letters burned in foxholes, a life of what-ifs rebuilt brick by brick. Your dad's letters saved me, David had said, eyes on the dotted line. Tell him I'm still here. The organist faltered, keys clanging discord. Linda's maid of honor gasped, but Ethan held his ground, the aisle a battlefield of his making. This wasn't destruction, it was resurrection. For Dad, for the love time had tried to bury. For himself, too, the boy who'd hidden his heart, now bearing it for the man who'd taught him grace. Mark turned fully, Tuck's jacket straining, and crossed the 3 steps to David in a blur. Their embrace was seismic, shoulders shaking, a dam breaking after half a lifetime. Whispers erupted, shock, sympathy, the small town symphony of scandal. Linda stood statue still, Then softly, I think I need to go, slipping her ring onto the altar like an offering to gods kinder than this. Ethan watched, tears carving hot paths down his cheeks, the church spinning into a vortex of released breaths. He'd stopped the wedding. Yes, but in that freeze-frame revelation, he'd thawed something eternal. Love, the stubborn kind that outlasts veils and vows, rising unbidden from the frost. As the guests filtered out in stunned waves, murmuring of headlines and heartbreaks, Ethan slipped into a pew, exhaustion crashing like waves. Mark and David clung together by the altar, whispers weaving futures from threads of the past. You came, Mark breathed, forehead to forehead. David smiled, faint and fierce. For you? Always. But Ethan's story wasn't done unraveling. In the chaos of his own unleashing, he'd ignored the buzz in his pocket, a text from back in Columbus. From Riley, the photo editor at the Gazette where Ethan interned. They'd danced around it for months, stolen glances over layout desks, coffee runs that lingered into debates on ethics and exposure. Riley, with his crooked grin and ink-stained fingers, who'd held Ethan's hand after a bad breakup last spring, murmuring, "You're worth the front page." Hail, the text read, heard about the wedding drama. On my way. Hold a byline for us. Ethan's laugh bubbled, raw and relieved, as he typed back, make it exclusive. Outside, Willow Creek's autumn leaves swirled in protest. But inside, the air hummed with possibility. The truth hadn't just shocked, it had set them free. The reception hall at the Willow Creek Inn was a ghost town of half-eaten canapes and toppled champagne flutes when Ethan arrived. The late afternoon sun slanting through French doors like accusatory fingers. He'd lingered in the church, giving Mark and David their moment, 30 years compressed into tear-streaked minutes, before Linda's quiet exit pulled him back to reality. She hadn't screamed or slapped, just nodded, eyes glassy, and murmured, I deserve the truth, even if it hurts. Ethan walked her to her car, arm linked in hers, the weight of apology heavy as the gravel underfoot. I'm sorry, Linda. For all of it. She'd squeezed his hand. Voice steady, don't be. Your heart's bigger than this town. Ethan. Use it. Then she drove off toward her sisters in Dayton, taillights fading into the maples. Now, then buzzed with stragglers, cousins nursing beers, Aunt Clara dissecting the scene with wide-eyed relish. Ethan wove through, nodding apologies, until he spotted Mark and David at a corner table, heads bent close over untouched cake. David's hand cover marks, thumb tracing knuckles like Braille, reading the language of lost time. Ethan paused, chest tight. They looked younger, unburdened, as if the years had peeled away like onion skins. Ethan, Mark called, voice thick, waving him over. David stood, pulling him into a hug that smelled of wool and resolve, solid, paternal in a way that bridged gaps Ethan hadn't known existed. You did this, David said low, eyes shining. Gave us a second chance. Mark's gaze held pride and pain, the teacher in him surfacing. Son, I should have told you sooner. About David. About me. I thought protecting you meant hiding. Ethan shook his head, sliding into the booth. You protected me by being you. Dad. The rest? That's on time. Not us. They talked then, words tumbling like creek water over stones. David's deployments. The letters smuggled in care packages. Mark's marriage to Ethan's mom. A genuine affection forged in compromise. Her quiet knowledge of his heart's true north. She knew, Mark admitted, voice cracking, about David. Said it made her love me more. That I had room for all of it. Ethan absorbed it, the mosaic of his family shifting into sharper focus. No villains, just humans navigating the fog. As dusk bruised the sky purple, Riley's truck crunched into the lot, headlights cutting the gloom. Ethan met him at the door, pulse skittering like a live wire. Riley Kane, 26, all lean muscle and tousle blonde waves, stepped out in faded jeans and a Henley that hugged his frame. Camera slung over one shoulder, the tools of a man who chased stories, not ran from them. Heard you made the front page without me, Riley teased. But his eyes searched Ethan's face, concern etching the corners. Ethan pulled him aside, under the inn's awning where rain threatened but held off. It was everything and nothing. The words spilled then, the box, the emails, the drive with David, Riley listening with that intense focus that made Ethan feel seen, not just heard. When Ethan faltered on the church confrontation, Riley cupped his jaw, thumb brushing a stray tear. You're brave as hell. Hail. And hot when you're storming altars. The kiss came natural as breathing. Riley's lips warm and insistent, tasting of mint and the road. Ethan's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling closer, the world narrowing to heartbeat sync. It wasn't fireworks. It was hot fire, steady, sustaining. When they broke, foreheads touching, Riley murmured, "Told you." Worth the byline. Inside, Mark raised a glass as they entered. David beside him like a missing piece slotted home. To truths, Mark toasted, voice carrying over the room's hush. Glasses clinked. Tentative cheers rising. The scandal softening into something human. Aunt Clara even smiled, whispering to her neighbor, "About damn time someone shook this town up." That night, the four of them, Mark, David, Ethan, Riley, drove to the Old Hale homestead, the house on Elm Street glowing under porch light like a beacon. Beers cracked on the deck, stories unfurling into laughter and ache. David spoke of Vietnam sunrises, Mark of classroom triumphs, Ethan of city lights and hidden bars, Riley chiming in with tales of dodged deadlines and darkroom confessions. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent witnesses, as hands linked across the railing, fathers and sons, lovers reclaimed, futures sketched in tentative strokes. But Willow Creek didn't forgive easy. By morning, the whispers had teeth, school board murmurs about Mark's lifestyle, Linda's friends circling with pitying calls. Ethan fielded them at breakfast, coffee bitter on his tongue, while Riley scrolled news feeds on his phone. Small town, big echo, Riley said, but his free hand squeezed Ethan's knee under the table. Anchor, ally. Mark faced it head-on, calling a staff meeting that week, standing before colleagues with David at his side. "I've lived half a life in silence," he said, voice steady as lesson bells. "No more. This is who I am, teacher, father, man in love." The room held breath. Then applause rippled, tentative but real. Principal Hayes clapped his shoulder, histories about change. "Mark, you're writing it." Ethan, back in Columbus by midweek, threw himself into work, The Gazette's city desk a whirlwind of deadlines that dulled the homesick edge. But Riley was there, coffee in hand, stealing kisses in the stairwell. Their first real date was unscripted, a dive bar jazz night. Ethan's head on Riley's shoulder as sax notes wailed loss and longing. "You think they'll make it?" Ethan asked, nodding to a gray-haired couple two-stepping slow. Riley's fingers traced his palm. "Like us? Hell yes." That night, in Riley's walk-up, overlooking the Scioto, they mapped each other with deliberate tenderness, scars, and sighs. The poetry of bodies finally home. Ethan woke to sunlight and Riley's sleepy grin. The world outside a canvas waiting for their mark. Months blurred into a rhythm of visits. Thanksgiving at Elm Street. Now alive with David's blueprints for a garden office. Mark's laughter freer, deeper. Ethan chronicled it in a feature for the Gazette. Coming home, one town's reckoning with love's long shadow. It ran front page. Letters flooding in, support from strangers. Shade from skeptics. One note. Postmarked Willow Creek. "You gave me courage to tell my son. Thank you. Dad." Spring brought blossoms and bold steps. Mark and David exchanged rings in a quiet ceremony at the creek's edge. Ethan best man. Riley capturing it all in candid shots. Linda even came, hugging Mark fierce. "Happiest I've seen you." Ethan, watching vows seal under willow branches, felt the knot in his chest loosen. Love wasn't a zero sum, but a multiplication. Yet drama lingered, unbidden. Summer heat wave, and the school board reconvened. Whispers of budget cuts laced with bias. "Can't have that element influencing kids," one trustee sneered. Mark fought. Ethan rallied petitions, op-eds, a town hall where David stood tall. Love teaches more than any textbook. Riley's photos went viral, humanizing the fight, and the board backed down, votes swaying to progress. Through it, Ethan's bond with Riley deepened. Road trips to Chicago festivals. Lazy Sundays debating ethics over pancakes. "Marry me?" Riley asked one dawn. Rings simple as promise. On the deck where it all began. Ethan, tears blurring the river view, whispered, "Yes," sealing it with a kiss that tasted like forever. By fall, Willow Creek had thawed. Mark retired to consult. David designing community centers that bridge divides. Ethan and Riley bought a fixer-upper in German Village. Walls echoing with plans and passion. The box of letters? Framed now. On the mantle, a talisman of truths unearthed. One crisp October eve, for years to the day, they gathered at St. Mary's, not for vows, but vespers. Ethan stood with Riley, hands entwined, Mark and David beside. The organ hummed soft. No interruptions this time. Just harmony. In the quiet after, Ethan leaned into Riley, whispering, "We froze them once. Now we warm the world."